Hello, welcome back. Happy New Year and blessings upon you from the Plague Father himself. Today we'll be looking into all of the purchases for Nurgle that you can buy for Age of Sigmar. So as always, I wanted to start with an overview of how these tier lists go. If you're new to the channel, we'll be looking at every Nurgle purchase. So this is a little different than ranking all of the units in the army. We're actually going to be looking at, if you're building an army, like what purchases are going to be the best value overall for your hobby. Now I say every with an asterisk because while we are going to be looking at some accessories, things like the Battle Tome, and also looking at all of the box sets for Age of Sigmar, we're going to limit it to things that are still reasonably available or usable. So I have left out a couple things that are out of print, like the War Scroll cards, and we're not going to be looking at old discontinued Warhammer Fantasy Battle models. We'll be looking at bespoke Nurgle units only. Nurgle can coalition in Slaves to Darkness, Beasts of Chaos, and Skaven Pestilence units. So we're not going to be considering, for example, how a box of Chaos Warriors would be as a purchase for a Nurgle army. We'll save those models for their respective armies. Forge World, we're only going to look at things that are still sold as of the time of making this video. So sorry, Tom Orkhan, the Magoth Lord, you're a pretty sick model actually, but we're not going to be looking at you. There are a couple things like him and Plague Ogres, Kha'Zix the Befouled, that are still on the app, but not really available for purchase. So we're going to leave them out. And then the points are updated for January 2023. Games Workshop actually dropped a Battle Scroll update, which I was not expecting on the day that I am recording this video, January 12th, 2023. So I've gone through and updated this, so these are the most up-to-date points values at time of this video. Now we're going to be ranking based on three categories as always: value, aesthetic, and gameplay. And before I describe that, I want to give a big shout out to my buddy who plays Nurgle. He's a bit of a chaos legend in our local meta, and he really gave me a lot of good advice on, his thoughts on how the army works and what would be good purchases for somebody starting out. So big thank you to him. The first category we'll be looking at is value for money. So both how much it costs, any savings if it's a box set, and then also I'll be looking at the points per dollar. The average for the army is 4.2, and the median is about 4.03 flat. Aesthetic can be kind of divisive with Nurgle. If you look at Rodigus and the Beast of Nurgle over there, they're kind of gross models. I personally love them. I think they're some of the best looking models in the game. I think they're unique. I think they're amazing. My buddy who plays Nurgle actually kind of hates the aesthetic. He thinks they're disgusting, but he really likes how the army plays. So beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I may give Nurgle models a little bit higher ranking than some might. And then lastly, we'll talk about like what you're getting in terms of how it plays on the tabletop. Value is going to break ties in most instances, especially for box sets, as this is overall a value-oriented tier list. And just quickly before we get into the actual tier list itself, just a couple notes. We're not going to talk too much on the rules or kind of tactics of the army, but just so you understand, if you're new to the army, a couple things that I may be referencing in the video. The Nurgle army, one of their battle traits is called Diseased. Basically, you're going to be racking up diseased points on enemy models. Every time you end a movement or combat phase within 3 inches of an enemy, you put a disease point on that enemy. And every time you roll a 6 to hit on an enemy, you plop a disease point on them. And then during the battle shock phase, they take mortal wounds on a 4 up. You roll a dice for every disease point they have, and then the disease points go down to 1. Disgustingly Resilient is an army-wide ability. Everything in Nurgle has a 5-up ward and heals 1 wound during your hero phase. So just note that every model is going to be a lot tougher than it looks at first glance at its War Scroll. So even the Plaguebearers with just a 6-up save also have a 5-up save, and then are going to be healing up, although they only have 1 wound each, of course, but you get what I mean. A couple models which I'll discuss are locuses or loci of fecundity, meaning that every unit within 14 inch of that unit is then going to heal D3 instead of just 1 wound during your hero phase. Lastly, Nurgle is a summoning army. Just for reference, if you want to come back to this slide or pause here, you can look at all of the models that are summonable, and I'll mention some of them. A couple of the Forge World models are also summonable, namely the Great Unclean one for 35, and the Toad Riders I think you could summon as well for like 21 or something like that, but I didn't include them here because, Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. So first off, we'll start out by discussing the Battle Tome and the box sets that are available for Maggotkin of Nurgle. I usually like to start off these tier lists with a discussion of the Battle Tome itself. Mostly just to say that the Battle Tomes are very nice, but they're overpriced. It's $55 at full retail price. You can find them for around $47 at the standard 15% discount, which if you're not aware, Games Workshop kind of limits retailers to a maximum discount of 15%, so that's usually the best you're going to find. So for value, I give it a C. $55 is really kind of high for a thin hardcover textbook style book. But the aesthetic, these battle tomes are always very nice, kind of glossy pages. The cover is really nice on this one, some nice new art of the Rotbringer Sorcerer. And in terms of gameplay, I give it an A+. The rules are really great in the current edition of the Nurgle Battle Tome. They did a lot to make the army feel more like Nurgle. It's been lauded as one of the more balanced armies. It's powerful, but it's not broken, and it does what Nurgle wants to do. It's hard to move, they're slow, they're kind of playing that slow burn game of attrition. So really a great battle tome overall, and something that you're probably just going to want to buy at some point if you're playing the army frequently. So for all those reasons, I put it in the B tier. It's something that it's a rule book, but it's not something that you necessarily need to rush out and buy when you're just starting off with the hobby. Next up, we'll talk about the new Vanguard Nurgle box set, and frankly, I think this is one of the best Vanguard sets they've come out with. It really kind of did a lot of things right in the move from start collecting to Vanguard, even though Nurgle had two very good start collecting boxes, which we'll talk about in a minute. What they did was they kind of took some of the best parts of both of those boxes and combined them into one. So you're getting a mix of both the mortals and demons, which play a lot nicer together in the current edition of the game. What you get in this box, you're getting the Blight Lord set, of which one of the models can be built as a Lord of Afflictions, which is a hero. And I would suggest that you do build it that way, because then you're getting two heroes along with the Scrivener, which is a support style hero. And then you get a unit of Plaguebearers and a unit of Putrid Blight Kings, which are both battle line. Really great value here. I think the best you're going to find for any discount set currently. It runs for $130, as do all the Vanguard sets through Games Workshop currently. You can find it at a discount for $110. You're getting 860 points in this set, so pretty close actually to a 1,000-point list just from one purchase for $110. And in terms of points per dollars, this is of course based off the MSRP. It's 6.62 points per dollar, which is pretty good compared to a lot of the purchases in the line, and you're saving about 36% based off of compared to if you bought everything individually. So S for value. Aesthetics, I think you get a really great array of units in this box. The Blight Kings and the Fly Rider, Blight Lords are some of the best looking models in the line. And gameplay wise, you're getting a really good spread of units. These are all usable and powerful models and kind of core units that you might want in your army, especially the plague. Well, really everything, even the Scrivener, you're going to want to have around for summoning potential, and you might even want to have two. There's a lot of versatility in this box. If you bought two, would be totally reasonable for the start of an army. You could use everything in 2 copies of the box. So really, I like it, and that's why I'm going to put it right up here in the S tier. I think that this is probably the best starting place right now for the army for anybody who can afford it, looking to get into the army. Next up, we'll talk about the Start Collecting Maggotkin of Nurgle. This kind of holdover phrase. They used to use Maggotkin to refer to the mortals. Now it's the whole army. But this is the mortals focused Start Collecting box from earlier editions of the game. Still quite a good value. I give it an A+. It was $95 at MSRP, but you can still find these a little easier than the Demon Start Collecting box for about $100 on eBay or other retailers. And of course, if you can find it at your local game store, even better. You're getting 750 points worth of models in that you're getting the unit of Puscoil Blight Lords, you're getting the Putrid Blight Kings, and the one difference from this compared to the Mortals in the Vanguard is that the hero you're getting is a Lord of Blights. He's the only thing kind of holding back the gameplay ranking on this box. He's not currently a very strong hero in the game. We'll talk about him more on his own slide, but not as versatile as some other hero choices. But aesthetics, I give an A+. I think all of these models, including the Lord of Blights, look great. And you're looking at points per dollar ratio among one of the best of any purchase available right now, 7.89, savings of 41% compared to MSRP. So still a very good purchase. I put it in the A tier just because I put it kind of just below the Vanguard box in terms of overall value. And there's a lot of duplicates compared to the Vanguard box. So for most, I would say just grab the Vanguard box instead of this. You're getting more overall. Next, we'll talk about Start Collecting Demons of Nurgle. Part of why they had 2 Start Collecting boxes is that this was something that could be used both for Age of Sigmar and 40k. But this also retailed for $95 and is now out of print. This one is harder to find. Most recently, auctions that sold on eBay closed for about $120, and I couldn't find any currently available for sale. So for value, for that reason, I give it a B+. If you can still find it at $95, that would be more like an A or even an S. But just given that they're hard to find, you're probably going to be paying a bit of a premium because they're out of print. The value is going down, and I expect that to continue. But if you can find it at your local game store, it's still a very good pickup. In terms of aesthetic, there's some really still, I think, good looking models in this box, but a little bit older and the Plaguebearers and not a little samey in that a lot of the models are just different plays on the Plaguebearers. So I give it a B, kind of baseline or slightly below average aesthetics for the range. And gameplay wise, I give it A- in that everything in this box, with the exception of maybe the Poxbringer, is going to be useful, and also everything in the box is summonable. So these are all good things to have around as a Nurgle player. The Plaguebearers and Nurglings are kind of backbones of your summoning and just battle line. Not the Nurglings, but the Plaguebearers are a core battle line choice for the set. Overall, you're getting 580 points worth of models. Points per dollar 6.1, and savings of about 42%, which is really good compared to buying each of these individually. So if you can find it, worth considering. So because of the price increases and just overall difficulty finding this set, I do bring it down to the B tier. Although if you can still find it for $95, $100, it's easily an A tier purchase. Next, we're going to talk about the Broken Realms Nurgle set. This is the Invidian Plague Host of Gordle Pulp Skull. Really fun art on the cover as well. I love the little Nurgling. But what's in this box is 2 units of 10 Plaguebearers, a Sloppity Boi Piper, and a Spoilpox Scrivener. And it retailed originally for $90, but of course is out of print. The good news is you can still find these, and recently they've been selling on eBay for around $80 if you're lucky, and they still pop up in stores from time to time. And I give it an A for value. I think that just given what you're getting in the set, even though it's a lower points per dollar ratio and a little bit lower savings compared to the old start collectings at 38%, everything in here is very usable. The Sloppity Boi Piper is a very good support hero, as is the Scrivener, although if you have the Vanguard set, you are getting a duplicate there. And having just big blobs of Plaguebearers around is something I think most Nurgle players are going to want in their back pocket. So for all those reasons, A for value, B plus on the aesthetic. I think the two heroes look great. The Plaguebearers, kind of eh. But the gameplay wise, A plus even. So for all those reasons, I give the Invidian Plague Host box an A ranking. The last Nurgle box set available for Age of Sigmar is the Blight War Battle Box. This pitched a Nurgle force against a unit of Vanguard Stormcast Eternals, and it came out in 2017 and consequently is exceedingly difficult to find, and if you do find it, it's probably going to be at a hefty markup. It was originally $160 when it came out, but the only one I could find right now was listed for $275 on eBay, and for that reason I give it an F plus for value. But if you do happen to have one of these sitting around in your local game store for, 160, even, maybe 180, $200, it could be worth considering. Aesthetics wise, I give it a C. I think these are some of the weaker looking models in the line. Horticulus Slymax was actually released with this set. He's the Plaguebearer riding a snail around. He's kind of a fun model, but also kind of weird. Gameplay wise, I give it an A minus. You can think of the Nurgle half of this set. It's basically the start collecting demons, but instead of the Poxbringer, you're getting Horticulus. I would say Horticulus is a better hero than the Poxbringer, but you really got to consider whether you want the Stormcast half of the set or have somebody you could split it with. The Stormcast half of the set is pretty good. It's Vanguard units. A lot of those are still usable. But as far as what you're getting for Nurgle, it's 670 points. And you're only looking at a savings of about 20% of buying those Nurgle units individually, assuming you got it for $160, which is probably not going to happen. That does jump up to 56% if you wanted everything in the box to include the Stormcast units. For all those reasons, I put Blight War down in the D tier at this time, unless you're able to find some sort of bargain on it. Next, we'll talk about heroes, which is a phrase I use kind of liberally to describe the Nurgle heroes. Let's take a look. First up is going to be the Poxbringer. He's the first of the Heralds of Nurgle, and probably the worst of the Heralds of Nurgle. It's $32 or around $27 at a discount for one Plaguebearer looking unit. I gave him a D minus for value. You can find him in the old Start Collecting box, for example. Aesthetics wise, I give him a B plus. He's kind of where I'd say like kind of the baseline, like kind of average current range model should sit. He looks okay. He's got some cool little details there. I like the Nurgling on him. Gameplay wise, I give him a D, at least in the current battle tome. He's a 130 point foot wizard, and he doesn't really do a whole lot else. He does have, like, he can fight one after the other with Plaguebearers, although whether you really want him up and fighting, I don't know. And he has a situational mortal wound spell. Overall, kind of average, below average sort of wizard. I put him down in the D tier, at least based on current rules, and $32 for one foot hero. There's better ways to get a hold of him if you really want him. Next up is the Spoilpox Scrivener. Now, not to be confused with Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville, the famous short story. I could give you an overview, but I prefer not to. Anyway, literary jokes aside, the Spoilpox Scrivener is he's a great little support hero. He's one of the heralds of Nurgle. You can summon him for only 7 contagion points, so you're gonna want to have at least one, if not a couple of these around. But buying him individually, kind of poor value compared to getting him in one of the bundle sets. So I give him a D minus. It's $35 for one small foot hero. Aesthetics wise, however, I think this is one of the best looking heroes in the whole lineup. I just think it's awesome. I love the screaming teeth. I love the eyes are on that little growth on his shoulder. I love the tally and the quill. Just a lot of fun details on this model and everything I kind of love about the Age of Sigmar models as a whole. Gameplay wise, he's useful. You can summon him, like I said. He buffs up your Plaguebearers. You can give them +1 attacks, -1 rend, or +1 to their save. Great little support hero. Give him a B+ in terms of gameplay value. And only 100 points now, so something to think about. For all those reasons, I put the Scrivener as an individual purchase in the C tier. Last but not least of the heralds is the Sloppity Boi Piper, and I mean, just look at this guy. He embodies the fact that the Nurgle armies are just having a good time. They are spreading their gifts and plagues through song and dance to the world. Look at him go. Value-wise, I give him a C. He's $35 for a small support hero unit. But aesthetics-wise, I mean, man, he is playing a bagpipe made out of some kind of organ. I love the little dancing Nurgling with him. He's pretty awesome. Gameplay-wise, he's pretty great as well. I think he's arguably probably the best buff piece of the 3 heralds. He can buff up all of your Nurgle demons, and he puts out a 14-inch aura of mortal wounds on 6s, or +1 to wound, or interestingly, one where enemies can't pile in closer to your units than they started, which originally I might have slept on when I was newer, but if you've been playing the game for a while, the 3-inch pile-in move can really mess up your day sometimes. So I could see that being a very strong option as well. So some good options for buffs with this guy. 130 points. You can summon him for 7 contagion points. Great model to have around. Oh, and also importantly, if you play him, you can tell your opponent, hippity hoppity, here comes that sloppity. So that bumps him up a couple points in my book. I put the Sloppity Boi Piper up in the B tier. Next up is the first of our heavy hitters. This is the Magoth Lord kit, which can be built as either Bloab Rotspawn, who's pictured here, or you can assemble it as Orgot's Demon Spew or Morbidex Twiceborn. So a lot of versatility in this little kit. Value-wise, it's $80, which is actually pretty good for what you get here. And aesthetics wise, I give it a B+. I think the mount is pretty cool, and you get your choice of fat guy riding around on top of it. I think it's a very solid model and a good little centerpiece model for your army. I keep it at B+ because I think it's not quite as iconic or imposing as some of the other centerpiece style models that we'll talk about in a minute. But gameplay wise, I give it an S. And this is where I'm really putting a lot of value into this kit. As my Nurgle buddy puts it, this guy is, quote, godly, and he actually really values this as one of the core purchases for the army right now. Only problem with it is it's pretty hard to find. It's out of stock on the Games Workshop website, and you don't see it a lot in stores or online, and it has been selling for up to $100 in some places. 320 points, or about kind of right on the average of 4 points per dollar if you get it for that $80. But as far as things to buy for your army, if you're looking for a kind of big, heavy-hitting hero, general type of unit, you probably want to look at this seriously. Bloab Rotspawn is very powerful. He's a wizard who has kind of a mortal wound bubble on him. He has +1 to cast and an aura of -1 to cast for enemies. So just very useful. Orgoth's Demon Spew is a War Master, so he counts as a general even if you don't choose him as your general, and he can issue commands once per turn without spending a command point. He's a little fightier, he deals mortals on 6s. And then Morbid X Twiceborn, probably the weakest of the three right now, but he's kind of fun in that he's just a giant Nurgling, and he heals up kind of like Nurglings after Battle Shock, and he can return models to friendly Nurgling swarms. So all three of them quite strong and useful. For all those reasons, I actually am going to put the Magoth Lord up in the S tier. He's not as good of value as some of the other options, but I think really based on all of those reasons, what he's doing on the table, you could do a lot worse for starting a Nurgle army than just buying the Vanguard set and a Magoth Lord set. You'd be pretty good to go. Next up is Epidemius. This is a really old model. It's kind of my first impression of it. You can see I gave him an F for aesthetics. It's resin. It's $55 for this thing. It is a little bigger than it looks in the picture. It's got like, I don't remember the exact size, but the base is a little bigger than you might expect. But it's just poor value for kind of a gross old model. Now, what I will say is that he does have some role in the game. He has a pretty cool feature. He's the Tallyman of Nurgle. It's quite thematic. He tallies up diseases based on like how many demons you have running around on the table, and mortals too. And then when you get these points, you like add them to a little pool of points, which maxes out at 7, and then you can spend them to re-roll a ward roll, a casting roll, or a dispel or unbind. So that's kind of cool. Just a useful kind of little utility piece. The model is desperately needing an update, and I don't think is really worth $55. But anyway, Epidemius I put down in the D tier largely because he's expensive, he's old, reasonable piece on the table though. Next up is Festus the Leech Lord, and this is probably one of the best foot heroes for Nurgle right now. He's $29, and in him you are getting a wizard, and he has an ability where he hands out these poisons. You can see him like forcing some poison down some poor soul's throat right there, which I hadn't noticed until right now. That's kind of horrifying. Anyway, he it just happens. It's not a spell. You do D3 mortals to an enemy or heal D3 to a pal. And then he also has this spell, which if successful on a 7, he gives a -1 to save for the remainder of the game, which is kind of crazy if you can get it off. It seems pretty good. He's also a locus of fecundity, meaning that everybody within 14 inches is going to heal D3 instead of 1 at the start of your hero phase, which notably he's the cheapest option for that compared to everybody else. Is like a big Bubba Great Unclean one or similar. So pretty good value as far as the foot heroes go. A+, borderline S in terms of gameplay. I just hate how he looks. I don't like the big chin. I think it's gross. Although you could argue that means that, you know, maybe this is the best model because it's grossing even me out. All those reasons will put Festus the Leech Lord right up there in the A tier. Next is Gutrot Spume, which is kind of one of my sleeper favorite models in the whole line. As far as aesthetics go, I think this is probably the best, or at least my favorite, Nurgle mortal model. I love that he's like erupting tentacles from his arm. You know, he's got the good armor plates and the big axe, which would all be like kind of a joy to paint up. Value-wise, B, he's $29. I put discounted in quotes because this model is kind of hard to find at any sort of a discount right now. At least I certainly couldn't find him for any better than $29. 170 points. He's a foot hero. His big gimmick is that he rides the slime fleet, which is pretty funny, which lets him bring himself and up to 3 Nurgle mortals and set up anywhere on the battlefield edge 9 inches away from enemies if you choose to put him and them in reserves at the start of the game. You do the setup at the end of your first movement phase. So kind of a limited deep strike ability. Very valuable in Nurgle where everybody's really slow. So gameplay wise, I give him an A minus. A little less punch to that than the Lord of Afflictions, who has like a strictly better version of the Deep Strike. But all in all, for 170 point foot hero, good option and worth considering that foot heroes, all of these guys I've just been mentioning, probably going to be a little stronger going into this next general handbook. So for all those reasons, I put Gutrot Spume up into the A tier. Just a great model. Next up is the Rotbringer Sorcerer, who has kind of a neat role in one of the sub-factions, the Filthbringers. They get a bit of a discount on points. You pay 120 each or 360 total for a group of 3, and they have to be taken in a group of 3. But then if you keep them close together, one of them gets a +3 to cast, and then if you have 2 left, it's +2, or just 1, it's +1 anyway. But +3 to cast is pretty strong. A lot of people slept on these guys, and then Emma Mangles, I think it was, did very well at Adepticon with them famously. There's a great video of AoS Coach talking with her about her strategy on that. That's fun to watch if you're interested. But anyway, value-wise, I give him a C. He's a kind of standard foot hero. 33.50 is kind of pricey for this guy. It is a newer model, was just released with the new battle tome, updated from my favorite little guy from the old line. I actually like him quite a bit as far as the older models go. But aesthetics wise, I give him an A. I think it's a great resculpt of the old sorcerer model. Like some of the detailing with the fly wings on his belt, for instance. Gameplay B. There's some can be used very effectively, has been shown by some people running these in Filthbringers. But as just a standalone wizard, I think there's probably better ways to get some casting into your army, but worth considering. I'll put the Rockbringer Sorcerer up in the C tier. Next is the Harbinger of Decay. He's another older resin model, holdover from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and a pretty cool one at that, honestly. I love that there's a little sign that says Kislev. It's one of the only references to Kislev in any of the models. That's kind of cool. But it's $45 for this thing, which again is kind of a lot for an older resin model. Give him a D in terms of value for that. Aesthetics, like I said, he is pretty neat. I do like a lot of the details on him, but I do give him a B minus, just being older, and it's starting to show a little bit. Resin's just not as nice to work with as plastic. Gameplay wise, give him a B. He certainly seems like he has a bit of a potential niche as a utility choice. He gives you an extra command point in round 1. He has a 6-inch move, which is, pretty brisk compared to the 4-inch, 5-inch that most of your army is going to get and playing Nurgle. And he has this ability where on a 3-up he can prevent enemies from using commands in the combat phase, kind of like a Roar Monstrous Rampage, so that could potentially be quite useful. I give the Harbinger of Decay ranking of C. Next, let's talk about the Lord of Plagues, who's my kind of sleeper pick for maybe one of the better cheap foot heroes, largely because he's only $16.50. He's like the cheapest model in the entire range, and he's quite usable. He can help you gain contagion points when he kills things. He adds 1 to the attacks of your Blight Kings, so he's kind of a buff piece for your Putrid Blight Kings. And he also fights one after the other with your Blight Kings, which could be useful as well. So give him an A+ for value, just in that you have a totally usable little foot hero who, again, these little foot idiots are supposedly going to be more powerful in the next General's Handbook. Aesthetics, I give him a B+. I think he's kind of like he's a really good looking model, kind of the threshold of what you'd expect for the the mortal models, some fun details to paint up. Pretty simple, but gameplay wise, B plus as well. Perfectly valid buff piece if you're running leaning into Blight Kings. For all those reasons, I put him up in the A tier. I think it's totally worth it for 14, 15, 16 bucks. On the other hand, the Lord of Blights was not so lucky as the Lord of Plagues. He kind of cost more points and twice as much money to do less. He's 32 bucks for a kind of lousy hero at the moment, unless I'm totally missing something with this guy. I give him a D minus in terms of value. Aesthetics, I do give him a B plus. I think he's maybe a little more interesting than the Lord of Plagues. I like the gallows hanging off of his back. Always good to see the requisite hero using a warhammer, making it into the army. But gameplay wise, D plus. He does have a 3-up save, so he's going to be pretty dang tough. But that's kind of about it for this guy. He's otherwise kind of a foot hero who he does have this thematic thing where he hands off putrid heads to your putrid Blight Kings and gives them kind of a so-so shooting attack with only a 7-inch range, and he fights one after the other with Blight Kings. But I think all things considered, if you're looking for a little support hero for your Blight Kings, probably better off going with the Lord of Plagues. This guy also does come in the start collecting box for mortals. For all those reasons, Lord of Blights, it goes in the D tier. Next is Horticulus Slymax, kind of an interesting looking model. I really went back and forth for a while over whether I wanted to put the aesthetics as an A or like an F, but ultimately decided that this was just the right level of stupid that, I have to give it a little bit of love. You get the snail like with a Nurgling tied up to lure it along the battlefield, I think is hilarious. In terms of value, it's pretty expensive though for what you get. It's 60 bucks for a 10 wound doofus that's not actually a monster. It's just riding a big snail, so it doesn't get monstrous rampages. It does have some useful abilities, however. It lets you reroll charges for your Beasts of Nurgle and gives your Beast of Nurgle a +1 to hit. Lets you set up a Gnarl Maw, does some mortal wounds on a retreat, and importantly, it is a locus of fecundity, so it helps up with your healing as well. So, C plus, B minus, definitely has a role though. It could be a useful addition, especially if you're running Beasts of Nurgle. Below average on points per dollar, as 220 points was just reduced in points value in the latest round of updates from Games Workshop. So, worth considering. I put Horticulus kind of in the solidly average middle of the C tier range. Next up is kind of the most iconic model in the range, not just of Nurgle, but arguably of all of Warhammer in general. The great Unclean one, this updated plastic model was released several years ago, and man, it's just a wonderful model. I think he's iconic. You get a lot of different options for the weapons and little details and Nurglings to put on him. You can alternatively build him as Rodigus, the unique wizard. They're both wizards, but the more wizard focused, shown on the left there. As far as value, however, the Great Unclean one is going to have a pretty hefty price tag for that, iconic huge model of $150 US. 127 with the 15% discount at some retailers. So as far as gameplay, kind of went back and forth a lot on how to rank this guy. My buddy who plays Nurgle has not been super impressed with him, actually. He is like a big kind of wizard utility piece for your army, but he's not really going to be tearing up the battlefield, like killing things, which isn't really like his major role. But for such an iconic monster, for some of us with a little bit of that kid mentality of wanting to see, your big monster tear stuff up, I don't think you're going to get this quite as much with him as compared to like Scarbrand and Khorne or something like that. But, he does have a lot of neat abilities that can add up, and with the right artifacts, she does see a lot of play in kind of top competitive lists. Was recently reduced in points somewhat to 480. Rodigus reduced in points quite a bit to 460, but one of the crappiest points per dollar ratio in the entire range, even though you're getting like a quarter of a 2,000 point list in one go with this 480 point guy, it's still only 3.2 points per dollar. But all in all, he's a big, tough, stinky, fat, iconic Nurgle piece. And for all those reasons, I really couldn't disrespect the guy by putting him any lower than the A tier. Although there is an argument for putting him more down in the B. Just don't tell him that. Speaking of big Nurgle models, the Glockkin is arguably the biggest Nurgle toy out there. It's three brothers hanging out. They're doing boy things, stinking up the place. It's $125, so cheaper than the Great Unclean one. You can get it for about 106 at a discount. Aesthetics wise, I give this an S as well. It's another great big centerpiece model. Just kind of a fun unit overall. In terms of gameplay, it's a 2-cast wizard. It's got 20 wounds, it's tanky, it's fighty. This is probably going to be a little more fun to play with and like require a little less finesse maybe on the tabletop, especially if you're just starting out. It's got a little more oomph to it, which is reflected in the points. It's 650 points, recently decreased from 700. However, it's not really as competitive or strong, I would say, as the Great Unclean one. It's a lot of points to sink into this one model that doesn't quite, it suffers from a lot of these models that are a huge amount of points. You're sinking a lot of your eggs into one basket for your army, so something to be aware of. But if you like it, it is, it is a big chunk of your points for a 2,000 points list and just one purchase for $100, and better on the points per dollar too. You're getting about 5 points per dollar with this guy, and it is a locus of fecundity, has a number of other abilities as well. So for those reasons, I'll put the Glockkin of Nurgle in the B tier. Next is the Warhammer Underworlds Warband for Nurgle. It's Fecula Flyblown and the Wormspat. The way this works is you have to take them together, but they run around as 2 separate models. Fecula, the hag there on the bottom right, is as a wizard. She has like a one-time, like once in the game, she can cast 2 spells instead of 1. Her endless spells give things disease points, which is kind of cool. And then she also has the bodyguard feature with, basically she has 2 sort of slightly buffed up Putrid Blight Kings. I think they have like 1 more wound, but are otherwise identical to Putrid Blight Kings, that she can shove wounds off to if she wants. Value-wise, I give it a D. It's $42, I think, was the MSRP. That's what the Warhammer Underworlds warbands are currently going for, but you can't find it anywhere. The best price I could really find online on recent eBay auctions, if you could even find it, some sold for like $100 recently, which is just way too much for this. Aesthetics, I give it an S. I think all 3 of the models are amazing. It's nice to see, a lady Nurgle hag. And I love the little familiar as well. Gameplay wise, C+. I mean, I could throw it in an army. It got a little bit of a points discount. It's 240, but the question still remains, like, for 10 points more, you could run a unit of Putrid Blight Kings instead of this. You're kind of getting like a simple caster and less than half of a unit of Putrid Blight Kings, but there could be some utility in that, kind of splitting your points and getting, 2 things for sort of the price of 1, maybe. So worth considering. Also worth noting that you could, of course, just use you know, perhaps run one of the Blight King guys as like an alternate model for the Lord of Plagues or Blights, and then you could run Fecula herself as a Rotbringer Sorcerer, perhaps, and perhaps mix up your Coven if you're playing Filth Bringers. I know I would kind of want to have her, and then maybe like one of the other guys, and then maybe even the old one. You could have a Coven of three Nurgle casters, which would be kind of cool. But anyway, I put Fecula down in the D tier. Next up is the Lord of Afflictions, or the Puscoil Blight Lord set. So you get two of these Fly Riders in here, one of which can be built as the hero, the Lord of Afflictions. If you do that, you can run the second Blight Lord with him as a single Puscoil Blight Lord, or you can build it as two Puscoil Blight Lords. Both options are very strong. The Lord of Afflictions has this ability where you can put him in reserve with up to two Puscoil Blight Lords or the Plague Drones, and then you can deep strike them at the end of your movement phase anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches from enemies. The Puscoil Blight Lords themselves are quite fighty. Both have an 8-inch move, which is that is moving out for Nurgle. That's the fastest you're going to get. So some good, much needed mobility for the army. Aesthetics wise, give them an A. I think these are awesome looking. I particularly like the Nurgling riding his own little fly with the Lord of Afflictions there in the front. And gameplay wise, A plus. Only thing holding this back is I give it like a C for value. It's $70. There's some nice versatility in that you can either build the hero or not. You're getting quite a lot of points, but I think you're better off picking these up in part of one of the bundle sets, either the Vanguard or the Start Collecting if you can swing it. But it may be worth picking up if you just want some extra Puscoil Blight Lords. So for primarily the reason of value compared to getting it in a box set, put it in the B tier. Okay, here's one of our Forge World models, still available on the Age of Sigmar section of Forge World, so I put him in here. It's the Forge World Demon Prince of Nurgle and Herald of Nurgle. Now, I had a little trouble making heads or tails of like what this was supposed to be. It doesn't seem like he has individual rules. I think he's actually just a demon prince, so you use him as a coalition demon prince from Slaves to Darkness. And it's $91.50. It's resin, of course, being Forge World. I saw like somebody sold one for like 81 bucks secondhand on eBay, but it's hard to say where you could find this secondhand. I'm calling it 210 points if you run it as a Demon Prince. You could probably add 120 onto that if you run the Herald as one of the Heralds. But value-wise, this is an F. It's very expensive, as Forge World models are, for what you get, and it's old. It's kind of old, and it shows. The aesthetic is very much more 40K than Age of Sigmar, and I, kind of think it's a bit of a stretch calling this as like usable and both, although certainly I would mad respect if you run this in your army. I think it would be kind of a cool interest piece to have around. He's got a cannon on his arm, so again, and he's got like this barrel of sludge on his back. Again, it very much more sci-fi oriented. It'd be kind of funny running this as a demon prince, having him flying around the battlefield, attacking with his quote-unquote axe. But give him a C, I guess, for gameplay. I mean, the Demon Prince is a perfectly solid unit. You can use the extra guy as one of your heralds, but overall, I would skip it. And put him in the F tier. Something just like if you really have to have it for your collection, go for it. But otherwise, I don't think most people should mess with this one. Another Forge World model is the Forge World Great Unclean one. You can find the rules for this as the Exalted Greater Demon of Nurgle. It's $220 on Forge World. And recent auctions, it's used ones have sold from anywhere from 90 to 170 bucks, depending on the condition. It's 430 points. It's pretty similar to a Great Unclean one. There's some slight differences in the rules. I'll let you take a look at it yourself. It's on the GW app if you're interested. Probably one of the worst points per dollar of like the entire range. It's 2.3 points per dollar. Just I would go with the newer plastic grade unclean one myself. But aesthetics wise, I do love it. I got a lot of respect. This must have been like a major WoW piece at the time, especially if you compare it to like the old fantasy battle grade unclean one. Like it's clearly what they based the new plastic model off. I like that his tongue is kind of wrapping around that kind of rusty sword. So really cool aesthetically. Could be worth considering, you know, if you're a crazy Nurgle fan and just want to have it as like an interest piece, but otherwise probably skip it as well. So I put the Forge World Grade Unclean one also in the F tier. No disrespect, big guy. After all of those heroes, we'll be moving into the smaller range of typical units for Nurgle. First up are the Nurglings, which are a very important unit for the army and something not to kind of sleep on the power of these little fellas. They're not like the fightiest thing in the world, but they have like 4 wounds each. They are cheap to summon. They have this thing where you can deep strike them if they're in your original army near a terrain feature, and they heal all of their wounds at the end of a battle shock, so they can be quite hard to clear. Only issue is they're $35 for 3 of these little piles of Nurglings. I give them a C- for value, with the asterisk because a lot of the Nurgle kits actually come with little Nurglings that you can use to pop on your other models. And as my friend has informed me, you can actually build your own Nurglings with just a base and throw a couple of those onto the base to quite good effect. You're not going to have like a pile of like a whole bunch of them like this, but it can arguably look even better just having like a couple of Nurglings on the ground, put them on some rocks or some other terrain features, and kind of really make it your own for much less money. So that's what I would recommend doing, especially you know, if you have a couple extra bases or are looking to save a little bit of money. Aesthetics wise, I think they look good. They're what they need to be. They're a pile of goofy guys. I don't like entirely love the dome shape of the units. I wish there could be a little more variation, but they look fine. Gameplay wise, like I said, A plus. Again, they're only 100 points each, so pretty low points per dollar, but you're going to get a lot of use out of these. They summon really cheap. They're just a good thing to have around to be able to summon. So for all those reasons, the Nurglings go right up there in the B tier. Next up are the Beasts of Nurgle. These are $50 for one, or $42.50 at a discount. Give it a D plus C in terms of value. Maybe being a little harsh here, but there's not a lot of variety in the kit for $50. There's only 2 alternate sculpts, my buddy tells me, so kind of lame for a $50 kit. And aesthetics wise, C plus. It's really not the most exciting Nurgle model. It's just kind of a blob, which I get was kind of the idea, but I think they probably could have. I don't know. I would have liked to see a little more. They're described in the lore as kind of these big puppy dog acting creatures who want to come share their love with you, and the model doesn't really sell that to me. It just kind of looks like a Jabba the Hutt looking thing. But gameplay wise, A plus. They're a very strong unit. They can run they can run in charge. They can retreat in charge. They can leave some disease points behind when they retreat. They're pretty fighty. They deal mortals on the charge. So there's something that's a much needed, one of your more mobile units in the army, and a little more fighty as well. So a good pickup for that. Again, one of the worst points per dollar ratios, though, 2.2, 110 points for one, and you can summon these. So something important to have around for your army. Not the best value. I do put it in the B tier for its gameplay options. Putrid Blight Kings are probably low-key my favorite battle line option and some of my favorite models, if not just in Nurgle, then in the whole game. A lot of variety of how you can build these guys up. It's $60 for a kit of 5, but I do give it a D for value, given that A, that's expensive, and B, you get them in the Vanguard set and some other box sets. Aesthetics-wise, though, I give them an S. Some of my favorite models. Love the weapons, love the armor, love kind of the weird mutations that they have. I think they really scream Nurgle to me. And gameplay wise, give them an S as well. They are some mean green boys. They've got 4 wounds each. They do 5 attacks a pop at 3s, Ren -1. So pretty fighty for Nurgle. They're also going to be doing mortal wounds versus enemies that have 3 wounds or less, given their relentless attacking feature. And I think that it's just very thematic. They're like big, tough, scary, and they just kind of keep chopping away like this like unstoppable zombie-esque kind of Nurgle warrior. So they're awesome, but get them in the Vanguard kit would be my advice. So all in all, I would put them in the C tier. Although I will say that if you are just starting out and really just want to kind of dip your toes in the water with one kit, this would be one to consider buying as your first ever purchase if you just want to paint up a couple models, see what the hobby is like. Next up are your Plaguebearers. These are kind of one of your bread and butter battle line options in addition to the Blight Kings. These are a great defensive unit. At $38 for a unit of 10, I give them a D for value again because you can get them cheaper in the bundle kits. 150 points for a unit of 10. A little below average on the points per dollar ratio. Aesthetics wise, I give them a C+. These are, I do like them. I probably like them more than most. They're not like the most exciting units. They're like a little older and they're kind of goofy looking, but I think they get the job done. Gameplay wise, they're, 1 wound each, 6 up save, but they've got that, they're still disgustingly resilient. And they do what they need to do. They have a kind of crappy attack profile, but they're going to really kind of like a lot of Nurgle units. They're great for screens. They're great for gumming up your opponent. You can summon them in. They're pretty hard to move for 150 points. And of course, if you put them into bigger blobs of 20 or 30, they're going to be even harder to move. So good for any Nurgle player to have around. Again, though, I would recommend picking them up in one of the box sets. I put the individual set in the C tier. Plague drones are plague bearers on flies. They're pretty cool model. I think they look a little better than just plague bearers on foot. I like the big flies. Value wise, it's $60 for 3. I give it a C. It's kind of what you'd expect for a GW cavalry type unit. Gameplay wise, it may have been a little harsh in the C-. They importantly have 8-inch move, so they're fast. You can potentially deep strike them with the Lord of Afflictions. You can summon them. However, they're just not as strong as the Puscoil Blight Lords. For not too many more points, you're getting kind of what at least I would, in my opinion, would be a much stronger unit. But they're cool, and they certainly have a purpose of flying around the board, catching objectives. They have a little missile attack that's nothing to write home about. They are battle line if you're playing the Droning Guard sub-faction, which is not one of the more popular ones, but it's something. And although I do put them in the C tier, I would say probably, at least right now, better to lean into the mortal flyboys. Next up is the Rotmeyer Creed, which is the new Warcry warband that was released with the launch of the second edition of Warcry. These guys are really cool looking. I love the models. I give them an S in the aesthetics camp, but a D minus in the value camp. It's $60 for this unit of 10. Now, I give it an asterisk on that because if you're just looking for cool models to paint, or if you're interested in playing Warcry, I'd say it's a significantly better value. You're also getting the Warcry cards in the box with these guys. And you could also, you know, if you really want it, you could pick them up in one of the Warcry box set if you're looking to get into Warcry, and then also use them in a Nurgle army. As far as what they do in Nurgle, they are pretty weak in terms of their stats. They have like not a very strong attack profile, kind of one wound guys, but they can be a cheap, effective screen. But they have this interesting ability where when you spread disease points, they actually, just by having these guys in your army, it doesn't say that they need to be nearby or anything. That disease is actually going to spread to other enemy units that are within, I think, 3 inches of the enemy in question. So a way to kind of buff up your disease battle trait by just including this 130 point unit of guys that, again, you can use as a screen. They also fulfill one of your battle line requirements if you're playing Blessed Sons, which is one of the more popular sub factions. So worth considering. All in all, I do put them in the C tier, but there is a strong argument to be made for having them in the B tier, especially if you want them for Warcry as well. Okay, next is the Plague Toads, which are famous, beloved, and currently really bad. It's $91.50 for 3 of these guys. You know, I say $75 at a discount. I seem like somebody had sold some on eBay for about that much recently, but you know, your mileage may vary. I give them an F minus for value. It's probably one of the worst you know, purchases in terms of what you're getting for your money right now. But in terms of aesthetics, like A plus, even S, I love these guys. I can see why they're such a fan favorite. I just hope that they get updated sometime with either newer rules and hopefully maybe like a plastic model that maintains the aesthetic. I think having them as these weird, blobby, like disgusting toads is pretty awesome. There's also an alternative you know, version where they're being ridden around by Plaguebearers. I think they're called Poxriders. But just to give you a sense, they have 7-inch move, which is good, but then they have like a 4s and 4s, no rend, crappy shooting attack, a 4s and 4s melee attack that does exploding 6s in melee, and really no other relevant abilities or reasons to use them at all, other than kind of flexing that you're running Plague Toads, which is totally valid. So if you're into the collecting aspect and are just a big Nurgle fan and have to have them and money is no object, go for it. I think if it were me, if I were buying something off of Forge World, I mean, this would probably be my top pick of the 3. But of the entire range, I would still unfortunately have to put the Plague Toads down in the F tier, but top of the F tier. And that does it for our units. Just a couple kind of miscellaneous things, starting with the faction terrain piece, the Feculent Gnarlmaw. So these have a number of uses in your army. It doesn't cost anything to have them. You get to put one down for free at the start of the game, and there's other ways to. You can summon more. Some of your units let you put down another one. Basically, it's treated as a friendly unit for the purposes of the diseased battle traits. So you'll be putting those disease points on enemies that come nearby, and also you get extra contagion points for each one on the table that doesn't have enemy units nearby. So kind of put your opponent in a bit of a double bind. Do I put something close to it to deny you the contagion point, or then, but then, you know, they're getting disease points and maybe taking a couple mortals. It is what it is. It's $45 for this thing, which if you've been around the channel, I'm not a big fan of the faction terrain pieces in Age of Sigmar. They're all don't cost anything to include in your army, meaning you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't have them in your list, but it's like this massive tax to have them because it's like $45 for one, and then if you want to have any sort of option to put down a second one, you got to pay another $45. You can find them for 38, but I give them D minus, borderline F, and then, the points per dollar ratio I don't even put here, but it's obviously 0, right? Because it's 0 points. It's not getting you closer to your 2,000 point list. It's just kind of a tax, if you will, on playing Nurgle. Aesthetics wise, I mean, the GW's terrain typically looks quite good. I think this thing's kind of weird, but it certainly looks like something from the Garden of Nurgle, but there's not really any variety from one to the other that I'm aware of, at least. Gameplay wise, I mean, again, I give it an A with a heavy asterisk in that, it's free, you play it, it's doing something for your army, but it's not like winning the game for you on its own or anything. It's just something that you probably want to have if you're playing Nurgle, but it just kind of feels bad that you have to pay for it, or craft one yourself, which takes time, right? So for all those reasons, I put it down at the bottom of the C tier. It just kind of is what it is. Next is the Nurgle dice. 38 bucks when they were out. They're out of print. They're 20 to 55 bucks on eBay. I think you guys know how I feel about GW dice. They're perfectly serviceable, but $40 for dice is pretty absurd. F for value. These ones aren't even that aesthetically pleasing. They strike me as hard to read. I haven't seen them in person, but the kind of purple on puke green while thematic just doesn't seem very practical for playing the game. So I'd skip them. Put those in the F tier as well. And last but not least is the Nurgling plushie. I mean, what else needs to be said? Just look at this guy. He is jolly. He's cute. You can cuddle with him. He'll keep you safe at night. He was 30 bucks when released. You can still find him some places for about 30 bucks. eBay, pops up on Etsy, places like that from time to time. Value, priceless, clearly. Aesthetics wise, he's great. I mean, it's S. Now, one caveat, the reason I put the asterisk by the $30 on eBay is just be aware that there do seem to be some knockoffs floating around. You don't want to end up with a counterfeit Nurgling plushie. That will probably maybe actually give you a disease. If you look at this is a picture that was on I think AliExpress or one of those kind of websites. The print detailing is a little off. He's a little shorter, the horns are a little different, and he just looks a little concerned. He doesn't have that same aura of confidence as the true blue Nurgling plushie. Gameplay wise, of course, this guy also has an S. If you consider yourself a real gamer, if you think you want to actually win a tournament playing Nurgle, you probably need to have a Nurgling plushie with you, and just keep it on the table with you as for support while you're playing the game. That's what I would do if I were getting into Nurgle. So of course the Nurgling plushie has to go in the S tier, which rounds out our final tier list for Nurgle purchases. It comes out to be kind of a nice bell curve here from S to F tier. And notice that most of the army is really pretty usable. I really think the Nurgle range is a great range overall. There's some great ways to get some discounts through the box sets if you're just starting off. And I wanted to give you guys an idea of what I would buy. So if you've stuck with me this long, I wanted to give you guys a little bonus. This is Budget Waz Budget Picks. Basically what I would recommend buying at each of these budget points, starting with if you had $20 only to spend dipping your toes into the water of Nurgle's Garden, then I would recommend getting the Lord of Plagues, of course. You can pick one up for $14 at a discount or $16.50 at cost. You'll have $6 to spare. So great little hero, something you can try painting up and will be usable if you decide to expand in the army. For $50 on a similar note, I'd actually recommend picking up a box of Putrid Blight Kings. You will be $1 over budget, but I think we can give ourselves a little wiggle room here. Just a great set, lots of kind of unique models in the 5 units you'll be getting, and a lot that you can do with this. You could really see myself spending a lot of time painting these to a high standard. If you are into painting and wanted to enter a painting competition and wanted to try out Nurgle while you were at it, I think this would be a great option for that. You could really spend a lot of time on these if you wanted to. Painting them up in unique ways. So, likewise, if you're new to the hobby, Nurgle in general paints up pretty easy, and you can paint these, just make them really nasty and fun. So, Putrid Blight Kings would be my choice there. If you got a little more to spend at the $100 mark, I would recommend actually cheating a little bit and saving up an extra 10, and just going for the Vanguard set. I think for the extra $10, the amount of value you're getting here, you're getting something that you can actually start to play the game with at like a Vanguard level, or just have somebody else run 860 points of something and then really learn how the army plays. And then lastly, at $200, you're really looking at starting to get like a little 1,000-point list going. I would recommend getting the Vanguard kit and a Magoth Lord. That would be about $190, assuming you can find the Magoth Lord set for $80 and the Vanguard for $110. You get $10 to spare, and then you've really got a good core to start building your army, playing some starter games with. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Happy New Year as well. I hope everybody has a great hobby year in 2023. And then lastly, of course, you know, if you have $1,000 to spend, of course, you definitely want to get the Great Unclean One squad with a pet plague toad. So if you like the tier list, let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for recently the channel had 1,000 subscribers, which is another major milestone. So just really appreciate all the support and hope that you know, 2023 is a great hobby year for all of you. Thanks, and take it easy.